I'll call this meeting to order. Developing meaningful relationships with our Indigenous neighbors is a priority of the Northern Rockies Regional Municipality. As such, we are collaborating with First Nation governments and Indigenous organizations to develop a respectful and meaningful territorial acknowledgement. This work also presents an opportunity to learn more about the culture and history of the Indigenous peoples in our region. Please be advised that tonight's meeting is available for public to attend virtually and is being streamed and recorded. Can I get a motion to adopt the agenda? Councillor Andrews, Councillor Roper, all those in favor? Motion carries. Petitions, delegations, James Emery, Iredale Architecture. And pardon me? That's what I was just about to say. I was about to apologize for no introductions last meeting. So we'll get them started off. How about we start off with Aaron? We'll work our way around the table. Mike.
Hi there, Erin LaVale, Deputy CAO and Director of HR.
Scott Barry, CAO.
Sean O'Shaughnessy, Chief Building Inspector.
Councillor John Roper.
Councillor Danny Souls.
Councillor Todd Penny, Acting Mayor.
Councillor Kyle Andrews.
Councillor Lorraine Gerwing.
Jaylene McIver, Corporate Manager.
Teresa Hansen, Deputy Corporate Manager.
And on the screen we have
Hi, James, Jack. It's Luann Watson, Director of Public Works.
I'm Jack McCuaig. I'm with McCuaig and Associates Engineering, MAE.
And James Emery with Iredale Architecture.
that's all we have on there.
Nope. Susanna, there she goes.
Sorry, and I'm Susanna Howard.
We've also got Adib on here, but he seems to have, oh, there he is. Please introduce yourself.
Yes, hello folks. My name is Adib. I'm with McCuaig and Associates, and I'm here for non-tech support.
Great. I know it's going to do it. All right. Let them take it away, I guess.
Well, I'll act as a very brief master ceremonies. Just you've seen me give a couple of presentations. You'll notice if you were here last time, I handed off to James Emery, who is with Iredale Architecture. He's one of the partners there, and he basically is much more up to speed of exactly what we're talking about today. And so I will have virtually no role today other than introducing him. So James, here you go.
Okay, thanks, Jack. I'm going to just share my screen. And I think I'm doing this correctly. And I hope that you can all see this properly.
It's still blank for me. Oh,
There we go.
Got it? Okay, so I'm not terribly sure which screen you're looking at. Where do you see? Do you see my mouse moving right now?
Yes,
we do. Yeah.
Good. That's the one I wanted. Okay, and hopefully you can hear me. I understand that our meeting last week, I was hard to hear, so I apologize for that. So I'm trying a different room and a different system. Is this working all right for everyone?
Loud and clear on this end.
Sounds good. Glad to hear it. So what I'm going to be presenting today is a follow-up to our meeting last week, where I was talking about the program statement and the development of that for the NRM facility and for the future up to 40 years for NRM. This presentation represents an exercise that we have gone through with NRM staff to look at different options that could be possible scenarios for the municipality to consider, especially based on the upgrades that are contemplated for this building. So there are going to be three concept plans that I'm going to present today. One represents sort of the the least intervention, the least cost perspective, one sort of intermediate, and one is the bells and whistles, so to speak. But I will talk to each one of those in more detail. And then I'm going to give you a summary of where we see those costs sitting relative to each other. And then I'm going to show you some precedent images to indicate just, okay, what do those costs represent? What kind of facility would you end up with if you spent this kind of money? And I'll talk more in detail about all of that as we go through. So 3 pieces to this whole presentation, and I will start with scenario number 1. No, I won't. I will start with the existing condition. So just so we orient ourselves, right here is level 1 of the facility for NRRM. You're coming in here to this large lobby, and you've got reception here where you've got a couple of workstations. Council chambers where you're sitting right now is right here. Finance is back in this location here. And then level 2 is go up the stairs. You've got this sort of big open space here with that clear story lighting, another big open space, and then the executive branch sits here along with finance. This is your Raven room, and you've got tech services and offices around here, and in the middle, washrooms there, and the kitchen is back in this corner, and the mayor's office is right there. And this is what we refer to as the back 40, or have been referring to as back 40. Not used a lot, mostly for storage. So those are the 2 levels that we're working with and that we're looking at doing some rework on. So concept 1, scenario 1. We're limiting the work to minimize alterations to the existing fabric. We are ensuring that energy, electrical, life safety, and accessibility upgrades are accommodated. This includes adding an elevator, accessible washrooms, new power distribution and lighting, upgrading most of the stairs for rise and run, and upgrading means of egress. So the pros for this one, it's a least cost approach. It addresses those basic upgrade requirements that I've just listed. The cons, it does not anticipate the needs of NRRM for the next 40 years. So that program statement that we've created is not really addressed in this scenario. So it doesn't address their needs. It doesn't address functionality issues. It doesn't take advantage of the significant impact of the energy upgrade requirements on the existing fabric. And this space occupies more space than required, or this approach occupies more space than required. So how does that look? So this is level 1, and there's going to be a couple of elements to each of these scenarios that are reasonably common. 1, council chambers, we're not proposing to relocate council chambers at all. We'll keep it in each scenario in this location right here. This back of house space here won't change much. It's more storage and service space. And this vault that exists right now, that storage, I think it's archive storage in there, we are suggesting that this might be turned over to the library as a very easy turnover space to them for extra storage. And one of the reasons for that is that the whole floor level here, as you know, drops down, right? We have some steps down into the space. This door, by the way, ignore that. We're planning to fill the floor in this scenario in every single one that you will see. But the work to do that for this vault is a little bit more. So this is actually the least cost option of just turning it over to the library space. Pretty simple thing to do, and we've got so much space to work with. It's not really a concern. So in this scenario, that public space here, the dark blue represents accessible space. We've put the elevator here for our accessibility upgrade. We've also done an accessibility upgrade on the washrooms, moved them over here. Reason we've got them here is they can stack with the washrooms we have upstairs. There are different places we can put these, but this is what we're showing as one scenario. And I should also indicate that for each of these scenarios that we're providing, this is one of many options that we can work with. When we get into more detailed design, depending on which scenario is approved, or whatever direction we may be given, we'll really hone in on the design much more. These are still high-level concept designs. So corporate services remains in here. What happens when we do this and put the washrooms is we are relocating some office space, and that's gained with a new office space here that was, this was originally washroom space here. And then finance remains in this location. We are upgrading all the stairs except this stair here. Susanna, I'm correct, right? This one doesn't really need much of an upgrade. You might be on mute, Susanna.
Sorry, I only found that one tread needed a small repair, but the stair is otherwise code compliant.
Right, okay, sounds good. So that's level one. It's not addressing functional needs, as we said. It's not addressing the project statement, program statement, but it's really trying to keep much of the existing infrastructure, much of the wall space, offices and all that we've had already, trying to keep them in place. So on the second level, same thing is true, where we have tech services up here, planning and development is here and in here. We still have Director of Finance here, and the executive office is here, Mayor's office there, and meeting room here, and Raven meeting room there. So all of these, and the kitchen included, all pretty much remain the same. And we have a vault storage space here that also remains the same. Only real change is this. However, saying that is this and the upgrading of the stairs in each of these locations. Having said that, however, every single space is affected because we are demolishing the entire ceiling to do the HVAC and electrical lighting upgrades, etc. And we're also cutting into most of the walls and breaking them open to do the upgrades, and then patching and repairing. So we'll refinish the walls, we'll refinish the flooring, etc. And it'll be a whole new ceiling throughout the space. So the only thing that's probably different is we're not moving walls around as much as some of the other scenarios. So that's an overview of scenario one, where we're trying to minimize the work as much as possible. We're not really doing much in the way of rearranging spaces. When we go to scenario two,
Just one second here.
Yep.
Councillor Roper.
Yep.
I just had a quick question before we move on.
Yeah.
What is happening with the back 40 there?
So in this case, good question, and thank you for bringing that up. So in the back 40 for scenario one and scenario two, we're not planning to do anything at this point. We're just, other than the fact that they're going to have the upgrades also for those spaces, and we'll refinish them, but we're not reconfiguring. And we don't really have anything for them in this other than storage at this point. We don't have any program space for them or designation. So it's extra space that's underutilized, essentially.
Great, thank you very much.
Yeah. So scenario two, provide accessibility and code upgrades, take advantage of energy, power, and lighting upgrade effects on existing fabrics. So we're now acknowledging in scenario two that the amount of work that has to be done is significant, and let's take advantage of that so that we can allow prepare the NRM for the next 40 years. So the pros for this one, it meets the NRM needs for the next 40 years, addresses functionality issues, and addresses all the upgrades we've talked about before. It is a higher cost option. It still occupies more space than required. So scenario two looks something like this. So your public entry space is still very similar to what it was before. Corporate services occupies this entire space here. We've given that over to the library. We've got the washroom space here and the vertical circulation elevator here. We do have a public meeting space here, so that if you've got staff who need to meet face-to-face with public, you don't have to bring the public into the facility. The staff can just come down and meet them here That's with scenario one. You may recall there were no meeting spaces on the main level. If there was to be face-to-face meetings, it would have to happen upstairs in one of the spaces there. So a couple things that are a little different here. So corporate services is able to occupy all this space. They have their own sort of kitchen area and print area. This we're considering flex space. So this allows for some of those visiting consultants and some public works staff, when they sometimes need to use the space, they are able to come in here. In this scenario, we're keeping the council a little bit more connected together with the mayor's office moving to this location, plus another meeting room in this space. Stairs again upgraded, and this area again just for service and storage. So that's the main level space. And then on the upper level, we are showing that we're now encroaching into this large unused sort of upper lobby space with an elevator and the washrooms in this location. So these washrooms are stacked with the ones below. And extending the floor out, we have to raise it up and putting the stairs there. So this gives us accessibility to this whole level. Going to this level, we've got a little platform lift plus some stairs. This becomes finance. It's now all grouped together instead of separated. Executive is over here. This is still the Raven Room and emergency operations. Kitchen still here. Archives and civic storage could be here. Again, we're not touching this space other than what's required to deal with the upgrades. And then we've got central meeting space with some flexible space here where this could be a foldable wall, just to give, so all of the departments can access this space. This is planning and development over here, tech services, some storage, and a plan room meeting space. And this, by the way, represents what we call a high top, sort of an open collaboration space. And these numbered items, by the way, are open workstations. So it's an open workspace. So public has access up to this point, but again, we have control at right there between the public and more private space. So that is scenario 2. Maybe I should just ask, anybody got questions on this scenario before I move on to scenario 3?
Anybody? Oh, go ahead, Jenny.
It's not so much a question, but I was just going to mention on the level 1 of scenario 2, we are looking at a renewed layout for council chambers that's a little bit more consistent with what you see in other communities, which provides more of a separation from council and the gallery, and that forward facing, just the orientation of this room is challenging if you have a full gallery because you have folks.
Yes, thank you for pointing that out. So you'll see sort of this arched element here. This would be where the councillor and mayor would sit. This would be staff here recording, etc. And then this would be your gallery space, right? So
I like that.
Yeah. Okay, are we good?
And just one addition there is too with that, just you notice the meeting spaces, so it gives instead of having large offices per se, to have people meet in offices, it's common meeting spaces, so you could actually make better use of the space. Important meeting space down here because, well, if you change the council chambers, we use this space a lot during the day for meetings, but of course with the large giant table being removed and a different layout in here, that space doesn't necessarily become available as the same as we have today to have the meetings too. So another reason for having additional meeting space.
Yeah, thanks, Scott, for that note. Okay, so I'm going to move on then to scenario 3. So again, we're providing accessibility and code upgrades like all the other options. In this case, we're trying our best to optimize the space use and also to provide handover space to other stakeholders. This option also includes preparing NRM for the next 40 years. So those are the pros. It does prepare for the next 40 years. It addresses functionality issues, addresses life safety and accessibility, as we noted before, optimizes space use, and provides space for other stakeholders. Con, of course, is this is going to be the most, this is the highest cost option. And when I get into the costing, I'll tell you a little bit about how we've done that and how that's affected. So you're noticing that we're representing this differently than what we represented the other ones. And that's because this one is really high level concept. We'll spend more time on it if council feels this is a direction you want to go. But it's certainly a real sort of change of thought, because you're quite used to the 2-level approach. This now becomes more of a 1-level approach for the offices, and with 26 staff, there's a 26 to 30 staff. It makes a lot of sense to try and keep everybody on one level if possible. It's much more efficient, much easier for communication amongst the staff, and then it's easier to control access, etc. So in this case, on the main level, what happens is you still have that large lobby space as you come in for public with the vertical circulation here, easily so that helps make wayfinding much easier, and washroom space here. Council chambers still remains here, but now this is given over to council, mayor, and that flexible space that could be used for outside consultants, public work staff, etc., whoever needs it. And then this space here is turned over to one of the other stakeholders, probably the library, because it's right adjacent, but that might mean reconfiguration elsewhere. However, it's that's open for discussion, of course. I should just mention this blue reference sense circulation. I didn't mention that before. So that's what would happen on the main level. On the upper level, you would end up coming up here at the elevator. So to understand what you're looking at, because I know this is a little bit different, those curved stairs are here, right? So that open to below lobby space is here. So the elevator comes up here. You've entered on this side on the lobby level, and you exit on this side on the upper level. Washroom's right here. Reception is right here. And this is your control. And you've got corporate services, you've got planning and development, executive branch, finance over here, some meeting space here, more central meeting space. This becomes the operations and can be a divided up space. Kitchen remains here. There's some workspace here, but it becomes very much a shared space. And then storage moves over into this element. We still don't need all this space, but it's now becomes more useful, because having all the departments on this level means that this becomes more useful as a real storage space for us. And so we would upgrade this portion of the back 40 to make that storage space more useful and efficient for NRRM. So that's scenario 3 in a nutshell. Any questions or comments on that at this point?
Anybody? I know for myself, I think the mayor mentioned it the other day, I really do like the fact that people can walk in on the main floor and hit reception and pay a quick bill or whatever they have to do, but that's just my 2 cents. Go ahead, Councilor.
I agree with that as well, but I was also thinking if we wanted to go with scenario 3, we could reconfigure slightly to have reception downstairs, and as a workaround. Has staff went over and seen what would functionally work better for them? Like, I don't work in the building, so it'd be nice to know how staff felt about potential layouts.
So, I mean, I'll speak from a corporate services front counter perspective. And one of the biggest challenges we have is being that interface between the public and staff who aren't us. Because we can receive people, but we don't often have all the answers, whether it's a building permit question, whether it's a tax question. So we're constantly hunting for the people that have the information. And we do, I mean, I mentioned it this week that I think the first time I set foot in the kitchen upstairs was like this week, after months and months and months. And that physical separation doesn't naturally lend to collaboration, unfortunately. So while I agree that it's gonna be odd for the public to now take more steps to access us being able to access each other is logically improved by co-locating us on one floor. And it's just, it's what, you know, what do you're gonna have gains and losses with any scenario that's being proposed. But the idea that I can, you know, those hallway conversations could continue to happen. You have easy access to know if people are in the building or not. And also, you know, putting finance upstairs at certain times of the year, that could be problematic because they do provide front counter dialogue a lot during certain times of the year, as does building, as does other departments. So it's just, yeah, I mean, that's a gain that I see for us. I don't love the idea of us being the only person on the main floor without easy access to our colleagues, but we understand there's way more considerations than that. So yeah, anyway, that's my thoughts.
I was just gonna add, with reception, like if there was some way to have some reception downstairs and then have that meeting room, I think it might be really advantageous that reception could greet the people. They have questions about tax. They have somebody could come down and then they have a nice private meeting area, because I know how it works now. You come out there and then you're in the lobby and you're trying to talk and more people come in, and I can see how it could cause issues. But anyway, Councilor Rowe.
Yeah, I definitely see a lot of benefits to the scenario 3, having staff all together upstairs, as well as providing more space for the library. I think that's really important for that nonprofit society if they want to grow in the future. That's quite a bit of extra space. As far as, you know, having our patrons go upstairs with an elevator, it's quite a simple thing. They just step into an elevator and boom, they're there. So it's not like we have to, it's not like it's any more work for people to go upstairs with the elevator, as opposed to right now where they have to, you know, climb the stairs. So, yeah.
Yeah. Okay, Councilor Gerwing, and then we'll get to you, Jack, on the screen there.
So this might be a dumb idea, but so was there any consideration given to locating all of the staff on the main floor and having the council chambers on the second floor? So I'm just a thought.
Yeah, so one of the first options that I came up with was the council chambers on the second floor. But there isn't enough room on the main level for all the staff, even with the council chambers moved. So, and there are some actual practical issues with trying to get that council chamber to fit upstairs too. But we decided not to continue down that road at a certain point for various reasons.
Did you have something else prior to that, Jack? I saw your hand was up. Sorry if you've been out for a while.
Jack, you're muted.
I was just going to mention, I noticed Susanna also has her hand up. Please be aware that we did have extensive meetings with staff, and all of the staff were spoken to and surveyed and everything else, all the staff and all the groups. And essentially, it sounds really easy to say, oh, well, we need a reception on the ground floor, but you can't have one person, you need at least two, and that person talks to this person, and you're pulling on a string that's part of a sweater. And all of a sudden you keep pulling it, and then there's all these other issues. And so I'm not saying we're definitely not cast in stone in any of these options, but a lot of different options have been reviewed and optimized to get even where we are. And we're perfectly happy to answer any of these questions about why something is done or why something isn't done. But I think today we're looking at a typical example of what might work well. So I think the question for scenario 3 is move everybody upstairs, and there's clear advantages to that, and there's some clear disadvantages. And option 1 and option 2, or option 1 and other, there's a clear demarcation there, and option 2 has a bit of leeway. I guess that's all I'm going to say.
Yeah, and I should say there are precedents, like City of Coquitlam is definitely all upper level, so you have to go up a level to get to their offices, and there's a couple of others out there So if you wanted to look at some precedents, certainly we can provide some options for you to look at too.
Susanna?
Hi, I just wanted to speak to the notion that service might be reduced by having everyone upstairs. When we were consulting with staff, they started to visualize a scenario where if the reception desk were upstairs with all of the other services, for example, Sean and the other people, that it would be possible as a person comes to the reception desk to say, hey, can I talk to so-and-so, or I have this question. And then it would be very easy for the person who's at the reception desk to simply step away into the back office, so to speak, and just glance in that person's office and say, you know, I have this question, or do you mind coming to the front counter for a moment and answering this question, so that there's actually a really natural connection instead of the front desk person having to go all the way up the stairs or to phone the person, and then Sean has to come all the way downstairs to talk to the person. And so in that way, actually, there's an enhanced level of service by reception being directly in front of everyone else's offices.
Well, that's a valid point for sure.
Yeah.
Sean's a popular guy.
Barry?
Just, oh, sorry, James, just yeah, from a, staff's a significant amount of times we spent just taking a look at various scenarios and different options and what works and what doesn't work. And at the end of the day, the most optimum from an optimization perspective approach is all on one floor for sure. And downstairs, obviously, it would have made the most sense, but we just didn't. The room is just not there compared to the available room upstairs. That said, you know, we look at this, and the reason why this also looks this way in terms of a very high level approach is because cost is always at the back of mind, of course, because, you know, and that's where the potential trade-off comes in, is in terms of what that balance is what might work the best might not also be affordable when it comes to when you look at the cost piece, which we'll get into shortly also. So,
Councillor Souls?
Yeah, I was just reminiscing that it was actually 40 years ago that I helped put the tile in the washrooms in this building. I worked at that 40 years ago, and now we talk in terms of a 40-year window where we're looking forward. And I think of how much has happened in the last 40 years and how some things have remained constant, like a gigantic table in the middle of a room. And it's just absolutely fabulous on one sense, but it's been its pain the whole time. I was thinking, though, that in the context of our economic world, like I've been on council now for a quarter of that time, for just about 11 years. And so when I think of how we were to a point in the early 2000, I mean, not early 2000, in 2010 and 12 and 14 and so on, where we had also going along with us an economic boom that was actually going quite strong. We had a strong forest industry, a strong oil and gas industry, and so on. And when I look now at these three different types of options, I ask myself, what would I do if I were asking myself in 2012 about this plan, and how would I look at it from that point of view? I understand that the fact that we're not in a scenario where we could look at a new building, but if we were to look at one, we would create the space that is the right space for us to all be on the right floor and so on. I want council to have that in mind, that we're still fixing up. It's not that we're turning a sow's ear into a silk purse. That's not quite the case. We are still working with a very old article that isn't going to be new no matter what we do to it above. So I think use caution, because the idea of building, like if we have an economic recovery where we do see economics grow again, we would probably look at this very differently and actually look at building new. And I would surely hope so, that we see something like that within the next 40 years.
Councillor Andrews?
Just with scenario 1 and 2, you'd mentioned that the back 40 was going to be relatively untouched. It'd be probably safe to say, though, that it's going to be updated because it's got to be tore apart. The bathrooms won't be put back into the rooms. It'd be just kind of more open rooms that could be offices later on if needed.
That's right. Yeah. So,
okay.
Yeah, that's correct.
So that's a
Go ahead.
That's a great thought, Councillor Andrews. So Jack, can you speak to what base work was planned for the back 40?
Well, base work, so the back 40 would be effectively open space. We would fix any firewalls, we would make sure it has electricity, it has heat, and basic lighting, and that's about it. So there'd be a big empty vaulted space and anyone can move in. It could be easily converted to storage for the town hall. It can also be given over to a tenant. And so, yeah, basically fire tape the walls, put light and power in and a bit of heat and call it a day. And that's all we were anticipating at this point. Now, having said that, if you remember one of the previous meetings, it could also be done completely given to one tenant and have all sorts of tenant repairs and all that sort of stuff somehow shoehorned and included in our upgrades. But at this point, that's not a discussion for today. It's space we don't need for the town hall, and as such, it's just going to sit there as empty space.
Right.
Okay.
Would you like me to continue then going into the costing side of things? I will do that.
I believe so, yeah. I think everybody's had their questions answered.
Great, fantastic. So, what we've got a comparison chart, and so I just need to caution everyone, the numbers that you're going to see are really high level. We know with the economic uncertainty right now, we just don't know where things are going one way or the other. And we just don't have a lot of detail yet. So we're using just some unit rates. We're doing a cost escalation because of your location compared to where we are in Vancouver. These numbers include all the numbers that Jack's team has already put together for basic energy, lighting and power, accessibility upgrades, including some minimal structural and roof upgrades, plus parking and landscaping. That's involved in all the numbers, but we're not including the building envelope upgrade costs right now, because that's a whole other discussion, because that we've already talked about previously. So we've kept that separated out. Some other things to be aware of: we're not assuming that we're going to change the furnishings. We'll just reuse what we can. And we've also not allowed for or included displacement costs, even though those are real costs that would have to be allowed for in every single scenario. And what that means is where when we're doing the work, the people working there have to be displaced somewhere else. So we usually put people in a swing space. Sometimes we're able to just move people around within the facility itself. But it really just depends on the type of work that we're doing, and the noise and the dust control and all that kind of stuff can be a bit too much to do that kind of scenario. But we haven't got to the point where we have looked at that closely enough to know exactly how that's going to look. So that's why we don't have displacement costs included in here at all at this point. So the breakdown is like this. If my page will change. There we go. So scenario 1, as I said, was the least cost option. Scenario 2, intermediate, and scenario 3 is the most expensive. So what I would like you to do instead of really looking at the numbers themselves, let's look at the relative cost. That's really probably telling us the better story right now. So that sort of cost increment between scenario 1 and scenario 2 is maybe between 8 and 10% increase of costs. I would allow maybe an 8 to 12% in that range. And then between scenario 2 and scenario 3, we're looking at maybe between a 10 and 15%. This represents about 12%, but it's probably in that 10 to 15% range. So what we've done with scenario 3 is we have said, okay, that lower level space, that's tenant turning over to tenant, we would make that a warm shell space. What that means is that we would demolish what's there, put new wall finishes on, like painting the drywall, well, patching it and painting it, patching the ceiling, putting the upgraded lighting in, because that's happening throughout the facility, and then also repairing the floor finishes. So it's a space that a tenant can take and then do their own fit out to fit what they need. So it's just really what we call a warm shell. It's got HVAC and it's got lighting. It meets code and
Alarms.
it's got the alarms, all that kind of stuff. Yeah. So that's what we're doing there. And then the scenario 3, as I said, we're taking the back 40 and we're now improving it even a bit more to help make that a better usable space for the NRM facility if it's all on the one level. So we've allowed for that sort of incremental cost there in this scenario 3. So that's sort of the comparisons and where they seem to be sitting at this point in terms of relative cost of each other. Are there any questions?
Yeah, 1 second, Councillor Andrews.
And so I understand this is talking about the building we're sitting in right now. And this project also expands quite more. So maybe more of a question for Jack. Are we going to get kind of a summary over all of our options and then plus the extras, right? Because like right now looking at scenario 3 at 9.1, but we also know there's the cladding outside and then there's still extras that aren't encompassed in this number. And I'm just having a hard time keeping them straight, that's all.
The only option to include in this is the cladding and windows. And that's the 3 point, I don't have it in front of me, but it's just over 3 million that would be added to all these numbers. Regardless of which one of these scenarios goes, all of that would be the same amount added to each of them because it's totally independent.
Okay, so then these encompass any upgrades to HVAC and stuff for the tenants as well?
It included the option 1 for the HVAC upgrade, which is well, I don't know how to describe it, but basically it would be the modern one, but you don't get the grant, and we're not doing the HVAC, the envelope upgrade.
The non-recommended one.
No, it's one of the recommended ones.
Oh, the middle one.
Yeah, the middle one. Thank you. Yes. Okay.
Okay.
I should have had the other report here, but I'm sorry I didn't bring it. So.
And just I know that these are high level costs, but I mean the likelihood of it coming under any of these costs is very low, right? I mean we're looking at this plus, not there's no chance we've overestimated.
Hard to say at this point. I would probably call these the bottom level of costs just to be safe in terms of your understanding. It's once we get in more detail design, we would know better. But the reality is that the relative difference is probably more useful for us at this case. But yeah, I can't see them coming in below that cost, but who knows? I just heard that the lumber pricing is going down by about 50% in the last 2 months. So we don't know where things are going to go.
We haven't seen that here, but anyway, Councillor Growing, go ahead.
Well, I haven't either, so I don't know where this is coming from, but that's yeah.
Are we going to get a copy of this presentation so we can, because I can't even remember what scenario 1 looked like right now. So I'd like to have a visual.
Yes, we will update the agenda with the presentation. I was also going to note that on June 6th, so we'll confirm that meeting. And I think that that'll really tie everything up in a bit of better summary format, because we did acknowledge that probably not everyone's taking notes of every scenario and every price that's been thrown out there. So that'll be the value of that meeting, is to kind of bring it all full circle and yeah.
Yeah, the intent was not to basically overload council with information from start to finish, was to break it up, and then like Jay said, was to kind of wrap it up and tie it together at the end.
We appreciate that. I do.
Because there's obviously there's lots of information. Like there's as Jack had mentioned too. I mean, each scenario within it could have different scenarios built with it. There's sky's the limit, really, right? So it's just getting that feel in terms of where council would like to go, move just in terms of next steps before we get too far into it.
And I could just 1 second, Jack. I'm going to ask you a quick question before you go. Knowing how renovations normally go, I know I've never been involved in something in this scale, but I mean, home renovations, we usually always, we're way low on our estimations, but I know that this is what you do. So, but how much of a cost overrun would you expect or is average when you're doing something like this?
We have allowed some contingency values in here, and we've allowed an increase for basically cost to work up north, for lack of a better term. So we've tried to build those in. The problem, as an example, I was talking to a contractor last week and he said delivery on a baseboard radiator was 23 weeks or something, just completely bizarre. So the whole project was delayed with the costs, whereas before I would expect in Fort Nelson they would be stocked. So I just, you can't rely on things right now. So yes, there's a chance that there will be cost overruns, but we have tried to make optimistic estimates of how bad it might be.
Okay.
How does that sound?
Yeah, and I think another thing just to note about that, sort of following on your question. So in scenario 1, we are not planning to sort of gut the space. So that means there are more unforeseen conditions in this scenario versus scenario 2 or 3, where we would basically gut it. It just makes it easier for the contractor. You don't have any hidden unknowns. You just go with it, right? So we've allowed for that in scenario 1, that we have some unknowns and we could have some hiccups along the way.
I was also going to add, just to piggyback on what Scott was saying, the breakdown of each of these presentations, although they're all interconnected, they all stand alone by themselves. The decision made on the first presentation with the energy will apply to any of the options you saw later. The decision on the second one was used for the third one, of course, because we were talking about what was required, but each of them does stand alone by themselves. And so at the end, we will tie them all together, but it's not like, but if I like this energy, will that tie me to scenario 3? No, not at all. You can pick and choose to some extent.
Councilor Roper?
So let's say we go with scenario 3 and we do the exterior cladding, windows, we're looking at $12 to $13 million. Just back to Councilor Sol's point, you know, if we were booming right now, we might be considering building new. What if we were to build this project from the ground up, hypothetically, for scenario 3? What would that cost as a new construction project? Just to compare in my head.
Without having done detailed calculations, I'm going to throw out the figure of about $25 million to build a whole new building from the ground up.
That's what I was thinking as well. Thank you.
Yeah.
Okay.
Okay. If there's not, are there any more questions? Yep. Go ahead.
Councilor Andrews?
Just a comment, like with looking at the differential in prices, I think we're wanting the functionality, they're wanting the everything. I don't think scenario 3 is a massive reach from number 2, right? Like functionality wise, everything like that, new building. And I'm just concerned of the tenants possibly filling that space, because now that's a big ask to them that potentially we're going to have to subsidize.
But I'll also mention, as they mentioned there, scenario 1, trying to go in and be as less intrusive as we can and get by. That's where I know on the homeowner's end, that's usually when you break a hole in the wall and you reach in to grab a wire and you realize, holy cow, they're going in all directions here. And we know that there's been so many changes made to this building, and we don't know of a lot of them that were done by staff gone by. So anyway, something definitely to keep in our mind. But Councilor Roper?
And just one more thing to keep in mind, just for everyone to consider, is that we have one chance at this. And this represents 40 years. So yeah, I think it's an important decision.
I think that takes care of the table. James?
Okay, thanks very much. So what I'll do now is the final portion of this is I'm just going to show you what we have done with federal government, provincial government, municipal, and some other public type corporations, the work that we've done with them at unit rates that we're working with that are commensurate with what we're doing here in terms of how we're putting our pricing together. So you can see sort of the level of finish and quality of the space that you can get at the dollar numbers that we're working with here. And hopefully that gives you a bit of an idea of what's achievable. So essentially, what could the facility look like? And so what I'm using we call these precedent images. They're images of projects that have happened before that give you an idea of what it could look like. So the first one is this an open office layout. So we did this for 8 floors of federal government department just recently, and simply a new T-bar ceiling with new energy efficient lighting, and then open workstations, representation of a high top situation or a flex. Actually, this is a representation of a flex space where somebody's just visiting and can come in and have it, put their laptop on it and have a quick few hours of work in the space. So this is an example of what we've done for an open office space. This is for a closed office. As you can see, fairly simple finishes, paint, and in this case that's just a vinyl flooring and surface mounted fluorescent up there. This is an example of what we did for agricultural facility for their chair of the board. So if you wanted an office space like the mayor's office or with slightly elevated finishes, you could do something like this on a limited scale and still sort of work within your budget. And as you can see, it's not over the top by any means, fairly simple, but still achievable. And then meeting room spaces, again, just making sure they're fairly bright with good lighting and some access, visual access around the space. And if possible, like these clear story lights, they're not expensive, but they will borrow some natural light if there happens to be any natural light nearby into the room. This we did for an engineering firm. These are high tops where you can, as you can see, plans are laid out here, and you can just an impromptu gathering around to look at something, go over something, and then go on with your day, so to speak, without having to set up a meeting room. And we find little spaces. This was for Office of the Human Rights Commission, where we had a little corner and we just made a little open collaboration space where 2 people could sit and briefly go over something. And it's not an extra lot of cost because you're not really adding much more, but maybe a nice pendant light or something like that. Reception, again, for this one engineering firm I just mentioned before, they didn't have a big budget, but we could create a very effective reception space for them that meets their needs and is attractive, right? So this is often what we're working with, sort of these limited budgets to work with. And then this is what we did for Seashelt. This is this scenario where you've got council sitting at mayor and council sitting here. You got staff here, and right where the photo's taken from, that's where the gallery space is. And, you know, in the council room, we're going to have to pull apart that ceiling to do the HVAC, sprinkler and lighting upgrades. So why not replace it with something like this where we have some uplighting, and again, it's just a drywall bulkhead with some T-bar ceiling up here. You can have pot lights, but you can have some uplighting. It just brightens up the space and freshens it up, and makes it a more functional and nicer facility to be in. And again, without having to spend a huge amount of money, right? You're working within a limited budget. So, and then
Looks
just
like
some,
a mafia room.
What's that?
I say that looks like a mafia room.
A mafia room, yeah. I guess with the wood paneling, all that, right? Yeah. And then some common space. There's ways that you can treat common spaces. This is a kitchen, actually, in one of the spaces that we did, and with an accessible sink in this case. And then just context. Just a couple things I wanted to note here. This was a facility where they had some existing walls with these curved wood corners, and we decided to incorporate it and use it as part of the design, and just painted the walls and refinished the wood. And this, especially here, is something that we like to do with our clients. It's a photograph of one of the employees, had a little competition. I think we had maybe 1 per floor on this project, and they chose certain images, and we just did a large print of them on a graphic film that just easily applies to the wall. And it highlights the talents of the employees, or it could be of the community if you've got some great photographers around. It's a great way of acknowledging their talents and their contribution to the community. So things like that are easy to implement in a space like this, and it's something that we like to do that personalizes the space a bit more. So that's all I wanted to show you. Any further questions?
Anyone? Oh, pretty quiet around the table here. I think we all have a lot to think about.
Mm-hmm.
All right. All good? Well, thank you very much. Appreciate it. Like I said, it gives us a lot to think about. Look forward to taking a look at it and mulling back and forth over those plans, but okay.
Great. Well, thanks everyone. And we'll, I guess, be meeting again, I guess, Jack, in June.
June 6th, I believe. I think so. I don't know the time of day, but I'm pretty sure it's June 6th.
Noon.
Yeah.
How is it June already? But can I ask for a motion to adjourn the meeting? Moved by Councilor Grewing. Seconded by Councilor Andrews. All those in favor? Meeting is adjourned.